This is our What Does Good Volunteer Management Look Like session. We've got some lovely guest speakers who are going to share their expertise with us today, and hopefully we'll have lots of great ideas kind of floating around. So just to start off with, I'll do a very quick overview of what we do in the partnership. So I've already told you who our partners are. So our aims are to strengthen the sector through connections and knowledge sharing, promote a culture of collaboration and peer support, and champion the role of the VCSE sector. Within the communities team at Voluntary Norfolk, there are lots of different ways that we can help you, hopefully. So we've got our networks, the Voluntary Norfolk Network, the Volunteer Coordinators Network, and the VCSE Leadership Network. These are all free to join. And if you join one, you'll probably be likely to cross over into the others as well. We also have in our team Momentum, which is the support offer for the youth work sector in Norfolk. So there is a Momentum Youth Work Network as well. We send out regular newsletters to each network. We've got Padlets, which are like online notice boards, and we encourage people to share on there any events or updates from their organisation. And we run good practice sessions a bit like this one, and networking events as well. We also have the Get Involved Norfolk platform, which is hopefully familiar to a lot of you, and you would have used that to advertise some of your volunteering roles. So within the EC partnership, we've also got other regular webinars and meetings. There's pro bono support from businesses through Norfolk Pro Help that sits with the Community Foundation. There's social enterprise support with Fuse. There's a monthly newsletter which all of our partners contribute to, with lots of advice and resources. And there is our kind of Get Involved platform, which just run through a few little facts about. We launched that in July 2022, so it's nearly 2 years old now, somehow. It's on average getting 5,000 visits per month, but that is going up month per month. We had 49,000 visitors in the first 10 months. That's unique visits. And over 2,000 volunteers registered on the site. These stats are now a little bit out of date. So yeah, we'll probably be able to update you with some increased engagement stats. Okay, and I think Nikki's just going to give a really quick overview of the vision for volunteering and the work that she did on that as well.
Yeah, well, nearly getting on 2 years ago, actually, just after I started here, we were asked to develop a Norfolk Vision for volunteering, and that entailed quite a lot of research into what was happening nationally around volunteering and also what was happening here specifically in Norfolk. So we carried out a lot of surveys, focus groups, we had one-to-one sessions, discussions, through some additional Know Your Neighbourhood funding. We were able to do some specific work in the Great Yarmouth area to add to our pool of knowledge, which was really useful. And then we launched the document last November at the Assembly House in Norwich, having had it endorsed by the Public Sector Leaders Board of the main public sector bodies around the county. And since then, we have been really working with voluntary organisations to encourage them to look at their volunteering strategies and to consider how the wider impacts are having effects on their organisations in terms of needing to review the way that they're recruiting and they're managing and they're considering the role of volunteers within their organisations and reflecting the shift away from the old idea of there being an army of volunteers out there who are sort of willing to come and do whatever we needed them to do, to the fact that people's lives have changed, people's attitudes have changed, the older generation who were the long-term volunteers have stepped back largely. So to ensure that we have enough volunteers to help us deliver the services and the mission that we have, we have to think about volunteering in a different way and to put the volunteers at the heart of what we're doing. So it's very much more about saying, what is it the volunteers want to get out of volunteering? How much is it to do with developing their careers path or adjusting to retirement or a change in their own personal situations, and that we need to really think about them and then think about how our work opportunities, volunteering opportunities, would be attractive to them, and that impacts on all aspects of what we're doing. We're also, alongside this series of workshops that we've been running, we've also set up a strategic steering group of stakeholders, of local authority, ICB, and voluntary organisations coming together to see how we can work more effectively to counter some of the challenges around volunteering these days, including better resourcing, more joined up working, looking at getting a wider campaign out there to recruit more volunteers, but doing it in the right way. And we've also set up a working group, which is looking at sort of nuts and bolts of how we as organisations can work together better, how we can collaborate, how we can combine resources, combine knowledge. So those have just had their first meetings in the last few weeks, and the intention is that we will see some changes happening over the next 6 months or so. But at an individual level, it's down to your organisations to do what you need to do to keep happy, loyal, effective volunteers working with you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nikki. And if anyone wants to find out more about the working group, then please do get in touch with Nikki. We can share our contact details at the end. So without further ado, I think it's time for our first guest speaker. So James Kearns is here from the BUILD charity, and he's going to talk about all of the work that BUILD have done to adapt their volunteer recruitment and tailoring their roles to individual needs, and specifically involving volunteers with lived experience of disability. So I will just get your slides up to share, James.
Thank you, Tasha. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, we're delighted really to kind of share some of the things that have been working for us over the last few years. It's interesting, this morning I've just completed a kind of a national survey for Nottingham Trent University about volunteering. And yeah, when I was filling that out, I kind of worked out that we've now got more volunteers with us than we've had for 20 years. And I wish I could kind of go, we've waved a magic wand, but I don't know whether we have. We're just trying to do things differently. So I'm going to sort of take you through this brief presentation. I'm kind of bragging a bit here, calling it award-winning volunteering. We were able to receive the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service back on our 50th anniversary in 2017. It's the only award we've ever won, so I'm going to keep bragging about it until we win another one, to be perfectly honest. But I would strongly recommend organisations to apply for that. It may be something that volunteers look at and go, well, if you've got that, maybe you're pretty good at volunteering, so that might attract people in. I don't really know. But like I say, it's the only award we've ever won, so we're going to make the most of it. So if I have the next slide, please, Tash. So what we're going to really talk about this morning is going to give you a very brief overview of the charity for those of you that don't know what we do, an overview of the different roles and responsibilities we have for our volunteers, a little bit about our kind of recruitment and retention process, hopefully then show you a brief video about what our volunteers think, and then if anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to kind of take those from there. So next slide, please. So the BUILD charity was started in 1967. We're an independent charity only working in Norfolk, and we provide social, leisure and learning opportunities for anybody with any disability that's aged 18 or over. We do that through around 300 community-based activities, primarily delivered during evenings and weekends, mostly within the Norwich and the Dereham areas. We do run a couple of things in King's Lynn. That kind of manifests itself into kind of the social life that most of us probably take for granted. So we run Sunday lunch and supper clubs. We run sessions in gyms. We work on allotments, temping, bowling, cinema walks, a whole range of things that we do there. But probably our biggest activity that we do are some nightclubs nights that we do with the Waterfront in Norwich and Dr. Thirsty's in King's Lynn. That will bring together around 200 people with disabilities once a month, really popular nights. And generally speaking, we're working with around 62 active members between the ages of 18 and 91. And the guy who's 91 has actually been with us since 1967. So really pleased that he's still on board. So the next slide, please. So if we start looking at our volunteers, this gives you some indication of the kind of people that we work with and the kind of roles that they do. So currently on our books, we've got 70 volunteers that are active with us, and they outnumber paid staff by 17 to 1. So that's kind of taught me over the years, if you don't look after your volunteers, you can't deliver the service. Because every one of those activities that I've mentioned in my earlier slide is supported by a minimum of 2 volunteers on every one of those activities. So we do need regular commitment from people. Around 18% of those people identify as having a disability themselves. Some of those are people who use our service, so they have a dual role within the organisation. Other people are people who have a disability, maybe a visual impairment, maybe they experience autism but are very high functioning, that actually feel more comfortable volunteering within our organisation because they recognise that we perhaps understand what additional needs they may have. We offer 2 types of roles, what I call frontline roles. So these will be the people that will be on the ground supporting those activities. So last night we would have had people supporting some 10-pin bowling in Norwich. Tonight I'll have 12 volunteers helping to support a social club that we run on the outskirts of Norwich. Tomorrow night I'll have 2 people supporting a group of people going out for, no, tomorrow night actually in the nightclub in the waterfront. On Sunday we have 2 people supporting a Sunday lunch club. So these are the people that are delivering those services for us. We provide them with all the information, we set the activities up, we send them the joining instructions and a list of the people that are taking part. So they're very much our frontline roles. Well, we also have what we call our back office roles. So these will be people that are involved in the administration, the governance, but also kind of marketing, fundraising, events. Because ultimately, if we haven't got those people in, we can't deliver the service that we do on the front line. So if I can go to the next slide, please, Tash. So what do we do? How do we recruit and retain these people? What is it that we've done that's made us more successful now than we might have been in the past? Well, I've become a very strong supporter and ambassador for the Get Involved service. And I know I can increase the size of Laura's head and ears for this because I think it really, really works. It is the area where most of our volunteers will come through to us now. So if you're not on that platform, as the label says, get involved, because that's bringing an awful lot of people into us. It is so much better in the design that was launched recently than the previous model was, because it enables organisations to engage directly with the volunteers, whereas previously it was very much kind of, if they didn't respond to the first contact, you'd lost them. You couldn't have a contact with them. But we also use the UEA Careers Central platform that enables us to recruit people from the UEA. And the thing I would say about that is UEA Careers Central is not just about students. It's about staff that work at the university, and it also is about alumni. So that's always something that's worth thinking about. And we do quite a lot of advertising on that, both for employed positions and also volunteering positions. And that's often a great place to go for specialist volunteers, because if you can match somebody that's on a particular course that's looking for some experience with a volunteering role that you've got a great match in making to that work. We also use our internal Facebook page, and that gets us in front of about 1,500 people across, well, presumably the world. We attract quite a lot of people through there. We're seeing an increase in people now that are coming to us through LinkedIn. Again, LinkedIn is very much more aimed at kind of professional people. But if you're looking particularly for trustees or people that have got back office skills, that's a really good place. And we're starting to see an increase in people that are volunteering there. But also people that will go to our website. So our website now is very much around giving people an indication of what it's like to volunteer for us. So we've got case studies on there. We've also got the forms that people need to fill in, and we talk about the benefits of volunteering. So those are the main areas where we're attracting people. There are kind of two things there that we're still doing that were more traditional. Face-to-face at community events. Post-pandemic, we've all noticed there aren't as many of those as there used to be, but they still work. Certainly, the conversion rate for us of talking to somebody face-to-face is higher than it is doing it online. So if you can sit in front of somebody, you can deal with all the concerns that they've got, you can answer all those questions, and they can then make an informed choice. So if you've got that opportunity, then please use it. What we've also done in the past is used kind of community newsletters and magazines through targeted campaigns. One of the campaigns we've run, and we normally run it around Christmas time. If you think about the church magazines and the village magazines that are still paper-based, that kind of come through your door in your local community, we decided that around Christmas time is the time that people mostly read them, because you haven't got time any other time of the year. So we always target those magazines, normally unpaid adverts, to talk about volunteering, particularly if we're looking for somebody in a community. So that's something that we've used and has been quite successful. When people make that contact with us, we look to set up an initial face-to-face meeting, and we talk very much about mutual benefits. So one of the things I will often be saying to volunteers is, what is it that you're looking to get out of this? Because what you get out of it is probably more important than what you put in. And the reason that we're kind of saying that is because if people don't enjoy volunteering, they won't commit to it. So it's really important for us at that early stage to understand what somebody's motivation is, to understand what kind of time commitment they want to make, so that we don't set something up for them that isn't going to work. So if you're thinking, I need this person to do 2 hours every week on a Wednesday night, and actually they're looking to do kind of, one afternoon a month, then it's not going to work. So really have that discussion to get the understanding. The process will then go through after a kind of a registration form. We do an enhanced DBS check for everybody, and we take 2 independent referees. We also ask people to complete what we call a volunteer preference sheet. So all of our volunteers that come in go through exactly the same process. And what we show to them is all the different activities that we do and when they happen, and ask them to select normally 5 different areas. What that then means is that when we launch our programs, which are on kind of 3-month plans, we then email those things that they've said they're interested in with all the dates and go, which of these are you available or would you like to do? That gives them a huge amount of flexibility, and it means that they're going to be doing things that they want to do rather than, what we want them to do. What we then send out is a weekly email of what we call latest vacancies, because quite often people will sign up to these things 2 or 3 months in advance, and then there's a change in their job pattern or family or something like that. So we always have a few gaps. So each week we send something out to all of our volunteers and say, over the next month, these are where we've got some gaps. If you'd like to fill those, that would be great. And we nearly always fill those things from there. I said when we bring people in, they all go through the same process. So we have a number of volunteers that will fulfill back office roles and frontline roles. And because they're all trained in exactly the same way, they get a safeguarding programme, a disability awareness programme on top of all of this. They can then do anything that they like within the organisation. So if I can go to the next slide, please. Now, hopefully, if Tasha clicks that, it will take you through to a video.
Okay, I've got the video, but I don't know if you can see it.
No, we're not seeing anything here. Not to worry, because what we can do is we can send you that link. It is on our website. It's just a 1.5 minute video that comes from our volunteers that tell us really why they volunteer and what they're thinking about. So if we can go to the next one. there's our website. So please do have a look at the website, look at the whole sections on volunteering, and you'll be able to see how we promote volunteering, how easy we make it for people to get involved with us. And you can have a look at the video that we weren't able to show you today. So that's a very kind of brief wander through of our kind of approach to volunteering. And I'll be very happy to take any questions from anybody that comes out of that.
That's fantastic. Thank you, James. And yeah, sorry about the video, but we will share it afterwards. But I think it would be great to take some questions if anyone's got questions for James.
Sorry, I have. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
All right. I always forget how to put my hand up.
That's all
Hi,
right.
James. Thanks.
Hi, Sharon.
Thanks for that. I'm just interested in obviously what you said about advertising in the publications and unpaid adverts. And obviously we place adverts, but I'd be interested in how you get them so you don't have to pay a fee. How does that work?
I think what we did initially, we had an intern with us just over 18 months ago, and we got her to identify and research all the different kind of community newsletters, church magazines, etc. Most of whom, you can find kind of Googling and you can find through different sources. What we then did is we made an approach to those editors. And if any of you have ever edited any community magazines, the one thing you've never got is enough content. So by contacting those people and saying, would you be interested in running a short piece, a couple of hundred words or something like that? And in most cases, they beat your hand off. In some cases, they said, well, we would normally charge, £50 or something for an advert, but because you're a local charity, we'll give it to you for nothing, or we'll charge you half price. I don't think we paid for anything. And I think we got featured in something like 50 different community newsletters. So it's doing the donkey work. But I always say to people, we started by saying to our staff and volunteers, if you have something like that comes through your door, can you send us the contact details for who the producer is? And that's how we started to build the database. So use your existing contacts for identifying those and target specifically those communities where you needed volunteers. That's
brilliant. Thank you so much, James. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got Liz next with your hand up.
Yep. Hi. I'm from Home Start as well. And James, I'd just be very interested in. We're very similar. We have to have the enhanced DBS check. We have to have 2 references, etc., etc. For those of you who don't know, our volunteers are across the county, but for the most part, actually visit families in their own homes. So there's a huge training program and safeguarding implications, etc., that we cover. But what I'm interested in is, you said, that you use some of your volunteers to support in the administrative situation, and I'm just wondering how that works, because as you say, some volunteer, we need that commitment from a volunteer, and certain things need doing on a certain day. So if you're asking a volunteer to do it and then they don't, or they can't turn up, etc. So I'm just wondering how you actually ask them to fit into, we're talking about diversifying offer, what do your volunteers want to do? How do you cover that securely in an administrative role? So if you could just give me some examples of what you ask them to look at or support you with.
Okay, thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
It kind of does depend on what we need doing. I think if we're looking for things that are regular, there's no point asking an irregular volunteer to be able to help with it. The sorts of things that we might do, just as a kind of an example, I've got folders and folders and folders of stuff for fundraising activities that we've done, bids to charitable trusts. I have a volunteer that comes in about once a month and just sorts all those to me into folders so that actually I can find them quite easily. Now, that's not time limited. So I can just say to her, I've got another pile of stuff that all needs to be filed. When can you come in? And she'll say, oh, well, I can come in next Wednesday morning. That's fine. That works. If we've got specific things like major mailings, again, we might look at a kind of a window and say to people, is anybody available on this particular day? And then as long as we can get a couple of people in to do it, we can make that happen. But also, when we're talking about admin, a lot of people now do research for us. So they can do that when they want to. I will say to them, can you research for me some information about 20 restaurants in Norwich that have got disability access, and I need that within a month. That's the kind of stuff people can go and do, and we work it that way.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thanks, James. And we've got Anne with her hand up as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say about the small parish publications as well, and I suppose I'm really just backing up what James said, but this has been far and away my most successful way of recruiting volunteers. But what I've found is that maybe the bigger publications, I'm thinking sort of Just Regional and voluntary, not voluntary, Village People, they want to be paid to get anything in there. But I've had no trouble at all, exactly as James said. If you're looking for sort of small villages and just targeting their community, parish, church magazines, they are always, I would say, receptive to putting something in there because they want to fill their space, and that's been my most successful method of recruitment.
Yeah, I think that's great, Anne, and I'd certainly endorse that. I think the other things that we can do that are free, mostly, occasionally cheap. Most communities now seem to have a kind of a Facebook group, for that community, and it's either a what's on or what's going on. Quite often I'll get posts that are totally irrelevant, but it's like, does anybody know who can paint my door in a geographical area? Well, all of those pages have the opportunity for you to post content. So if you're living in that area, or your fellow staff or your trustees or other volunteers are living in those areas, those are sites where freely you can post content to say, we're looking for a volunteer specifically to do this in this location on these days. And that reaches people that we traditionally may not have been able to reach, because they're not looking for volunteering, but they are interested in what happens within their community. So certainly use those kind of Facebook groups as well.
Great, thank you, James. And we've got Lauren. Your hand was up. It's just gone down, I
yeah,
think.
well, I've taken it out. It's still up. Thanks, James. There's some really good tips about how to recruit and get the kind of awareness out there. And I noticed you have, quite a lot of volunteers. How the other end? How do you have a formal process to end the role of a volunteer? I mean, and that could be mutual understanding, or they no longer able to commit the time. I'm just aware that we have quite a lot of people have volunteered in the past, and it's known if they want to continue, and it's just if there's a formal process that you have within that, James.
If they're going because they want to, then there isn't really a formal process. If they're going because we want them to, then we have a bit more of a formal process. Generally, what we will do is we try and maintain regular contact with people. Because we keep records of who does what, we can identify those that aren't active. So what we normally do is, as part of our kind of annual audit for data protection, really, we will go to everybody at least once a year and ask them to confirm they want to be engaged, just so that we can check that the data is correct. I think for those people that we start to see drifting, we do kind of make contact with them and kind of go, everything okay? Is there anything that is there any reason why you've not been able to volunteer? And sometimes that might be changing circumstances. Sometimes they won't want to come off completely. They want to stay engaged. So we just keep them ticking over and we keep communicating with them. When people do make that decision to leave, either because they're moving away from the area or something, we do a very kind of discussion with them to try and find out, what was it that they enjoyed about their volunteering. If they're leaving because they want to do something different, then was there something that we could have done better? What we then use is that information goes into our volunteer induction program, because I kind of call that everything you wanted to know about volunteering on day one. but we build the content of that from the people that are going out at the other end saying, I wish I'd known that.
Brilliant, thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you, James. So if you're ready, Evie, I'm sorry we're running a bit behind, but there's so much to talk about, so I think it's really good to have time for this kind of discussion. We'll move on to the lovely Evie, who's from Norwich Samaritans, and she's going to be talking about keeping your volunteers engaged and helping them feel part of a community, especially when they might be working different shifts, or not crossing over at the same, working together at the same time.
Cool. Thank you, Tasha. Yeah, I'm just gonna talk at you, but feel free to ask questions as we go along. So I'm from Norwich Samaritans. If you don't know what the Samaritans do, generally we provide a listening service to people in distress with the aim of reducing the number of people who die by suicide. Norwich Samaritans, we contribute to the service of the broader Samaritans charity, but we are an independent local charity, basically. So we do our own fundraising and we manage our own volunteers kind of locally. How our service here works, we are 24/7, 365 days a year. So we always have people in. We have about 180 listening volunteers at the moment, and they work in 4-hour shifts at a time. And due to the nature of the service, they have to do that volunteering in our branch. Our core kind of service shifts involve being on the phone or answering emails or doing online chat. And then we also do a face-to-face service as well. We always have at least 2 volunteers on shift at once, so no one's ever alone. But sometimes we have more than that, so we might have 8 to 10 people in at any time, depending on how popular that kind of shift is. We also have 2 shops, which are kind of one of our main income stream, and they each have volunteers as well. And I think we've got about 20 to 30 shop volunteers at any one time. So some of our challenges with supporting this wide group of volunteers, we have volunteers who volunteer at different times, days, who may not ever cross paths due to their other work commitments. We have a big range of volunteers with different commitments, availability, and we have people who are looking for different things from volunteering as well. For example, some people are more into the social aspect, and for others, that's not a big concern of theirs. And we also have volunteers who do very different things and who wouldn't ever cross paths necessarily. So the listening volunteers and shop volunteers don't tend to work together. Supporting volunteers is critical to us. Our volunteers are the service we provide. That's what we do. And the nature of the work that they do is difficult. So supporting them is our priority, and it's inbuilt to how we work as a service. So like I said, no volunteer is ever alone. Newer volunteers are always on shift with a more experienced volunteer. We have leaders who are available by phone. So they do their own kind of shifts throughout the day. And they're an experienced volunteer who's available. They're on call basically to provide support and guidance, and also to help volunteers debrief at the end of a shift. We also have a volunteer support team who provide follow-up support to volunteers. A member of the team is always on call throughout the week. And they also keep an eye on volunteers who are maybe taking a break, who have stepped away because of circumstances in their life. So that team helps kind of keep an eye on them generally. And we always have a member of the branch leadership team on call as well, if anything should happen or some extra support is needed. So those are the sort of kind of structural things we've built into how we work. But there's stuff we do on top of that, because those in themselves don't necessarily address the other issues of like feeling included, feeling valued, feeling connected. So there's a few other things we do, but it's always an ongoing project. It's always a thing we are talking about and trying to improve. But some simple things like we have a weekly newsletter called the Friday File, which one of our volunteers does. She works as, she's a listening volunteer, but she's also our publicity person, and she very kindly compiles this newsletter every week. and it has updates, things that are going on in the branch, things that we've done, good news, and volunteers can submit items as well. So if they want to talk about what their local group is doing or an event that's coming up, one of our volunteers is in an REM cover band and he likes to let us know when he's got a gig coming up. Those sort of kind of community things that just help keep people in the loop and know what's going on. And we also do a regular joke of the week, depending on who wants to submit a joke. But it's just a nice kind of little thing to keep people in touch with each other. We do a regular kind of thank you poster, which we put up in the branch, and that will have our stats from the previous month of how many calls we did, how many hours we did, and just a thank you to everyone for volunteering. And that helps kind of people know the bigger picture, because if you're doing your 4 hours at 2 a.m. or something, you don't necessarily know what's kind of going on in the bigger picture. A thing I started last year because of a session like this where people were sharing good practice was every volunteer gets a birthday card. And I think that's gone a really long way of helping people feel kind of nice and appreciated. And it's just a really simple thing to, you know, happy birthday, thank you for everything you do on behalf of everyone at the branch, that sort of thing. We recently renovated our premises, and as part of that, we set aside a budget to commission a photo board, which lives in the kitchen. And that has like a little Polaroid photo of all our volunteers and their name. So when you're sitting down to have a cup of tea, you can see, oh, these are all the people that I volunteer with, that I'm a part of. And on that is one of our favorite slogans, which is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. So that's just another reminder and a way of kind of seeing who else is in the branch. What else do we do? So we have an AGM every year, normally in autumn. But apart from just the kind of AGM trustee technical part, we make a day of it. It's a volunteers day. And we organise usually a guest speaker to come. We have kind of group activities, and that's open to all volunteers. So listening, shop, support volunteers, and it's a chance for people to get together, to talk to each other, to meet, and to kind of see the big picture of the charity and what we're doing. But we also do an annual branch meeting, which is a bit more of a town hall style thing, again, open to all volunteers. And that's a chance for people to ask questions, raise concerns, kind of chat about things, talk about how they'd like it to be different. And again, we include kind of group activities in that. So we give people a chance to talk to each other. Last time we gave them some problems and asked them, how would you like to solve that? And getting kind of different perspectives or working together, giving them something to talk about, which was really effective, actually. We do social events every so often. So we do a summer barbecue, usually a Christmas quiz. We've got an event this weekend, actually, because it's our 60th anniversary this year. So we're doing a little celebration. And we try to keep those free for volunteers. So we work that into the budget where we can. And then something we've introduced recently, which is kind of ongoing, is the idea of support bubbles. So this is where we have organized the volunteers into groups based kind of on their rough geographic location. And basically it's a way for them to have a group of people that they know they can go to, that they know they can chat to. And we gave them, I think it was about £5 each to have their first meeting. A lot of people went to like a cafe, or I think a group went canoeing and other people just went to the pub. But it was a chance for them to meet people who don't necessarily work together, who haven't met each other before, but a way to kind of get them together, get them communicating. But we're kind of still working on that. Some groups have really taken off and have run with it. Other groups are a bit quieter. There hasn't been someone who kind of stepped forward to take charge. So what we're doing now is kind of reassessing how can we help those groups work a little bit better, that sort of thing. So I think those are my main points, but questions, ask away.
Thank you, Evie. There's so much there, so many kind of different layers of ways that you're kind of helping volunteers to feel part of a community. Does anyone have any questions? Harry?
Hi, yeah, my Wi-Fi is not being the best, and I think it's a bit better if I leave my camera off. You mentioned a little bit about you have debriefings. I just would like to hear a
Yes.
little bit more about that and kind of how they're structured and if they're after
Yep.
every shift.
Yeah, sure. So it's a core part of what the volunteer does. It's part of their practice in a shift. So basically at the end of the shift, a volunteer, once they're finished taking calls, finished what they're doing, they call the leader and they talk to the leader about their calls and how their shift went, and did emotions come up, where it was anything difficult, that sort of thing. And that can be from like 5 minutes to 20 minutes. It really depends on the volunteer, what they need from that. And they're always speaking to a very experienced volunteer as well. And they do that at the end of every shift.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
That's great. Thank you, Evie. Has anyone else got any questions? James?
Yeah, thanks, Evie. I just wanted to ask a question really around your kind of socials and kind of like reward events. My experience when we tried to bring volunteers together for a kind of reward or recognition event is I get two camps. I get one camp that says, no, we're not going to come because we don't want you spending money on us that you should be spending on beneficiaries. And then you've got the other camp that kind of come along but still don't feel comfortable that we're spending money on it. What's your experience of getting that balance right? Because generally speaking, if I don't organise something, everybody says we should be. And if we do organise something, everybody says we shouldn't.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely have that too. I think there's always a group of people who think charity shouldn't spend any money at all. And yeah, I think we've accepted that's going to happen. Something that I guess helps is when we explain, it's been budgeted for, or if we're clear about like successful fundraising we have done recently, and then say, well, we've budgeted for this event. We know this is important. That sometimes helps. That sometimes mitigates that. But I think a little bit of that camp may always be there to a certain extent. And I guess on a practical level, sometimes we do like a raffle or a tombola. So there might be a small fundraising element to it, but it's all voluntary. And at least then for the people who want to contribute to it, they have the option to. That can help too.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So to have a sort of, a fundraising spin, but really it's about the socializing.
Yeah. And the purpose isn't fundraising, or the purpose isn't to fund itself, but it gives people the chance to help. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, and I think like you were saying, Evie, the sort of explaining why you're doing something as well is so important, isn't it? Where in other contexts as well, just to kind of have that open communication about, well, actually, this really supports our retention. It supports our strength as a community of people working towards the same goal. Perhaps that helps people to kind of get on board and they think, oh, okay, it's not just like a frivolous thing that somebody decided would be a nice idea. There is actually a reason behind it. And does anyone else have any questions for Evie before we move on? No, we had a lovely comment in the chat from Nick about how much energy it takes to support volunteers. And that's definitely true. I mean, everything you've just said, Evie, it sounds like a lot of work.
Yes, although it's it's important to realize it's not just me who does that. We have about 2 members of staff in the office, so we rely on volunteers to support that stuff as well. It's not just a staff effort. Like, we have a volunteer care team, all volunteers. We know they're here to help people, but they're here to help each other, and that kind of culture helps a lot. So it sounds like a lot, but it's not like it's one person doing all this. It's a real group effort.
Yeah, and getting volunteers as part of their role, or even their main role, to support other volunteers. Yeah, I think that's
exactly
a really good way of looking at it. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for your input there. So we've got a little Mentimeter activity, which is really just to help you to reflect on what your challenges are with volunteer management and support, and what resources might help you, and that also in turn will help us to think of ways that we can support you in the future. So I'll just share my screen. So if you haven't used Mentimeter before, it's very easy. So on your laptop, PC or phone, you can just go to the website, which is menti.com, and use that code to log in, which is just at the top of my screen there. Can everyone see that okay? Recruitment and time are coming through as big themes here. So I'm guessing that that's the time for you as an organisation or as a staff member, rather than the time that volunteers can offer. But if anyone wants to kind of put their hand up and just explain that, that would be great. Oh, loads of 19 responses coming through. It's interesting that word time is the biggest, so that is the kind of strongest theme at this point. Just give another minute in case anyone else is still submitting. Under recognition. That's interesting. So is that you're thinking that volunteers don't feel valued, or their time isn't kind of recognised as important?
Sorry, that was me, Sarah, Anglian Air Ambulance.
Yeah.
What I mean by that, and actually to be fair, that's not just EAAA. I think that's all the places I've worked, is that those who are not working directly with volunteers still seem to put us at the bottom of the pile when it comes to budgets, when it comes to time, when it comes to marketing or recruitment or anything like that. It's still, I think, that volunteers are, and everyone's going to scream at me now, but they are just volunteers. And of course, we all hate that, just volunteers, because we know without volunteers, our organisations will crumble.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what I'm getting at. Now, I'm not saying, I ought to actually say that where I work now, they aren't really under recognised. They are really, really appreciated from the top down and everybody. But there is still this thing of, oh, we've got something, a volunteer, we need a volunteer to do. Sarah, can you snap your fingers and get one just like that? And it isn't about that. It's about all these other things. It's the time, it's the recruitment, it's the retention. It's actually recognising, is there a volunteer who wants to do that role? They are volunteers. So that's sort of, I was trying to encapsulate it in just a couple of words.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's really tricky, but no, that's really useful. Thank you for explaining. It's positive to hear that perhaps things are a bit different in the new organisation you're with, the air ambulance, but yeah, it is a frustrating mentality that we're sort of all, I think probably we can all agree, we're sort of trying to change people's minds. And like Nikki said at the start, actually, about the vision for volunteering, it's about a kind of quite a sort of significant shift in how people think of volunteers and what volunteering is.
Yes.
Okay, we've had loads of responses there. That's brilliant. Thank you. So I'll just move on to the second question, which is what resources would help you? So that's resources that would help you to support volunteers, retain them, manage them, whatever that means to you, really. That could be resources that an organisation like ourselves could provide. It could be resources that you're looking for from your organisation, or perhaps sort of a bigger picture shift in terms of across the county or nationwide, changing attitudes, that kind of sort of more macro level, I suppose. hopefully that helps and isn't just making you more confused about this question. So feel free, if it's easier to talk about things rather than write them down, obviously do just chime in. Yeah, a budget for all of this is obviously something that yeah, it's really, really important if it's available. Free advertising, definitely. Dedicated team member and role, and yeah, and that's really interesting because I think we are kind of seeing that more and more across the sector, which is encouraging because it does mean that there is recognition kind of higher up and from funders that this takes time and it takes a lot of capacity. Correct pay scales for coordinators, that's interesting. Better transport links, and I assume that's kind of to help volunteers to access your organisation or your beneficiaries. Financial availability for the volunteers. So is that kind of because people are having to perhaps pick up extra hours due to the cost of living crisis, there's less time available to volunteer as an individual? CRM database to track our volunteers. That's very interesting. And I think Laura is going to touch upon that in her section towards the end. Just going to give another minute for people to fill that in. Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much for filling that in. You can keep submitting things, those will add to the slide, and then I can share in the follow-up email all of the responses that we've had there. So we're going to have a whistle-stop tour now from Laura about supporting volunteers and some top tips from her many years of working as volunteering coordinator and supporting lots of organisations like yourselves with the volunteer recruitment and retention journey. So take it away.
If you stop hearing me at any point, you'll have to shout because I won't be able to see anybody's screens or anything. So
okie doke.
It's just going to be a really sort of like whistle stop tour, but we will send out the slides. There's loads of notes and links involved in those as well. And if you've got any questions, as always, I'm pretty much always about. So with volunteer recruitment and management, first impressions do count, as with any other sort of interaction that you have. So if a volunteer does come into your organisation and is greeted by somebody who's not expecting them, don't know who they are and don't know who's looking after them, that doesn't bode well for their experience, and that may well put them off coming back to you. So do make sure that you're providing a warm and friendly welcome, and that everybody who should know that they're coming does know that they're coming. Training is always an important part of any role. It does help volunteers feel prepared and confident to do their role, forms new relationships within the team they're going to be working with, and also gives you an insight as to where, if you haven't already discovered this, the volunteer could be best placed within your organisation that's going to best sort of harness their skills and abilities. Someone did mention this in the chat, and I know James did cover this earlier as well, so that's a really key point. Communication is key. Obviously, Evie's touched on this as well. And that's with any relationship, whether it's with co-workers or volunteers. So do ensure effective communication is fundamental throughout their whole volunteering journey with you. There's much to learn from a volunteer. So if you're communicating well, you'll always be aware of what is appropriate regarding tasks that you'll associate with your volunteers, their capabilities and capacities. And obviously this does change with whatever sort of personal life situations come up. So having regular communication with them does keep you up to date on what's going on with them. In regards to roles, be flexible with roles rather than give a list of tasks. Discuss with applicants in the early stages what their skills and attributes are and work around them where possible. We're creating roles that are a good fit. And James mentioned this again, and there's obviously ways you can do this in regards to sort of adding bits into your application forms and early discussions to really find out what skills that your volunteers have, and to be able to sort of move roles around to fit them. Again, ideally, this is good to discuss at the early part of recruitment process, but you can do it at any point during their volunteering journey. So do consider that if you're not doing that already. Do you want to flick over to the next slide? So direct support from volunteers varies, and that does depend on your capacity. So there are various options: supervision meetings, informal catch-ups and group supervision. So it's important to embed something into your organisation that gives volunteers that safe space to discuss matters that affect their volunteering. Personal lives and their capacity do change, so having that good relationship with your volunteers allows you to effectively support them through any changes that they may encounter. How you do this will look different to others, depending on, again, your capacity. So do have a look and see which works best for you, but also encourage your volunteers to feed into what would work for them, whether they want a supervision, whether they want a group catch-ups, and really involve them in the whole process in embedding that into your organisation. Next slide, please. Thank you. So other forms of support you can provide, there's buddying and peer support. So buddying is a great way to support new volunteers and those that may benefit from additional support. It's also a nice way to show more experienced volunteers that they are appreciated and valued. It obviously doesn't replace the need for any supervisions. It's in addition to that and does complement that. So don't just put a buddy in place and cut out the supervision. We've had some sort of great examples of these already, and the support bubbles are a really good idea. So ensuring your volunteers are up to date, as it can be hard to engage those that have been volunteering for some time. That's especially sort of important for anybody who's just starting a role, who's got some long-term volunteers. They may be a bit reluctant to change. So trying to do that in a really sort of positive way and involving them in the discussions as well is a really good way to sort of get them on board with any changes that you're looking to implement. It might be that you can speak to other organisations regarding some training as well, and share some of that burden, especially if you've got budget and capacity issues. We did mention earlier about sort of exit interviews, and there obviously will come a time that the volunteer has reached their full potential with you and therefore may seek experiences elsewhere. So really try to have those conversations and continue your support from their very early recruitment to when they may leave your organisation. If you don't have anything to offer them, so if you can't do a buddying or something that gives them something else in addition to their role, it may be that you have to explore other options with outside of your organisation. You can refer them back to us and we can support them in finding other roles, or you may have built relationships with other organisations and you'll be able to discuss that with the volunteer. Just gives them that really positive experience with you. And when they carry on that within their new organisation, that's a great advertisement to volunteer with you as well, to show that they were valued, even though they decided to leave, that you still had that real sort of importance in volunteering, and wishing them well on their next journey. So that's a really good one as well. Next slide, please. So really important. I'm sure most of you are doing it already, but saying thank you. There's many ways you can say thank you to your volunteers, and just saying thank you is one of them. We've got a few examples on here. I won't go through them now because we don't have an awful lot of time, but there are some really lovely ideas that our platform creators, DMOB, have come up with, and you can sort of click on that link and have a look at those. Also, thank you video compilations. We did do one for our volunteers that helped during our COVID response, and you can check out that one in the link as well. But like Evie touched on, the birthday cards are a really lovely idea, and annual events that bring volunteers together just to say thank you and show that they are really valued is lovely. Next slide. So somebody mentioned about volunteer management tools and CRMs. I've put a couple of examples on here that are just for you to sort of have a look at. So Assemble offers software to help organisations recruit, manage, retain volunteers. It does cater for teams from all sizes. So if you're a small or large group, then it will be able to support either size. It does support with rotas, reports and expenses. And I know it is used by RSPCA, Red Cross and Barnardo. So that's a good one to check out. There's also 3 Rings as a secure online volunteer management system. That's designed to give volunteers can give their time without any hassle. So it's a bit like you put a task on, they log on and they say, yeah, I'll do that. So that works like that. Civi CRM is software that assists non-profits in managing contacts, communications, donations and events. And it's based here in the UK. So that's quite a nice one to use. So do have a look at that. We've also got Better Impact that some of our voluntary Norfolk services do use. These are paid for services. So you're best to sort of go on, pick the different parts of the system that you'd like to use and you'd get a quote directly from them. But do have a look at that if that's something that you would like to look into further. And obviously DeedMob, which is our Get Involved Norfolk platform. We do have some very sort of basic volunteer management features on there. If they're not turned on for you, then I can turn those on and we can go through how to use those. But it's very sort of basic, like you can assign tasks to members of your organisation, so that'd be potentially volunteers in different areas. And you can also upload documents and such like, so if they've got training, DBS checks, that sort of thing, you can upload those so that they're stored in one place. And there's one slide left, but I don't need to say anything about the last one. But if you do have any questions, then let me know.
Thank you, Laura. That was incredibly quick, a lot of information in one go. So people might want to just kind of digest some of that.
Yeah.
And look at these lovely quotes. And I think there's been some great quotes actually overall today. I took down something that James said earlier, which was just, if people don't enjoy volunteering, they won't commit to it. And so it's really important to understand early on what their motivation is and why they're coming to you. And I think that links really nicely to what you were saying, Laura, about fitting the role around them rather than the other way around. Has anyone got any kind of questions for Laura about some of the more practical steps there, or any other thoughts or queries they want to put to the group? This is the second to last workshop we have planned in on supporting volunteers. We've also got one on safeguarding young volunteers, which has been added in on the 23rd of May. The link for that, the booking link, has just gone live, and I think Laura should be able to share that in the chat. But I'll also send all of these links around after the session as well. So that is going to be a very focused session led by Gemma from the Safer partnership, so the Safeguarding Children's Board. And so it will go into a lot of detail about how you can put those processes and policies in place to support young volunteers. So specifically, we're kind of talking about under 18s here, because you will need to have an awareness of safeguarding regulations for that. There's also our wonderful Give It a Go extravaganza coming up on the 7th of June. So if you're on our mailing list in our networks, you've probably heard about it already. But it's not just a volunteer fair, but an extravaganza where we booked out the forum for a day. It's the end of Volunteers Week and the start of the big help out weekend. So a lot of kind of activities going on in that week around volunteering across the country. So we've got spaces available for people to book a stand or an activity space. I think we've got 5 spaces remaining. So I'll send that link out and do book if you haven't already. We are asking for a small £20 contribution to book your space, as we've sort of paid to book the whole forum, but you'll have the space for the whole day. We're encouraging people to kind of think about some interactive activities they can offer there, so that we're kind of getting away from the traditional standing behind a table approach to recruiting volunteers. and kind of trying to engage people more in what they'd be doing as a volunteer. There's also going to be talks through the day from volunteers from your organisations. So do let us know if you'd like to have a volunteer in that space as well. And if you can't commit to being there all day or having a whole space, there will be a drop-in zone as well, which is free to book a space for. Just let us know if you'd like to be part of that and what time you're available, and we'll reserve a smaller table for you in what we're calling the chatty zone, which is going to be kind of like a cafe style area. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what we've got coming up. I believe Laura is going to put some of those links in the chat. And thank you all for coming today. It's been a really useful session. So I'll send out this recording as well when it's ready, the slides, and any other resources